Hello everybody, it's Sunday, it's Sega, it's 16 bits, and if it's Sunday, and if it's Sega, and if it's 16 bits, it can only be the classic Super Hang-On. Let's go for a ride all around the world. My name is Patak, I am a Super Hang-On runner. I do very many things, but one of my loves is this Genesis Classic from 1989. We are going to go through all of the stages in the arcade mode today. Should take about 50 minutes, and we'll give you some tips and tricks along the way. Ciphering, if you're here, if you'd like some tips to beat JKL, because somebody's going to have to do it, we can do that as well. I will let you know that there is an in-game timer for this, but we'll obviously have an RTA time as well. We're going to start in Africa with a 6-stage course, and then we'll move through to Asia, through to America, and through to Europe to 18 stages. We're going to have 4 music tracks, and we'll listen to them all today as well. So we've got Outrider Crisis, we've got Sprinter, we've got Winning Run, which I think everyone knows, and we've got Hard Road. Let's get this going. So the race is about to start. I say race, it's kind of half a race and half a time trial, because you don't actually have to finish in a specific position. The timer is counting down from the top of the screen. All you have to do is reach each checkpoint before that timer hits 0. Now, I figure most of you know about racing games, but we'll go through the basics anyways. You can accelerate, and when you get to 280, you can tap C for the turbo. Now, I didn't have the manual for this when I was younger. So when I used to play this game, I didn't actually know you could turbo, and I never used to be able to complete it. So Cypher and I were in the same boat with that one. But when you turbo, it's going to push you to the outside of the course, and there are some problems with that, which we'll discuss in a while. First, I'm going to let you know, you see that time there, 34:53? There's a slight bug with the in-game timer in this game, so what we're going to do, when we calculate the actual time, we're going to take that 53 off, because it duplicates. That's nothing you need to worry about today, we've got spreadsheet capability to do that with. One other thing you may notice, we're riding a bike as opposed to a car. Now, whisper it, but I used to be a Nintendo runner as a kid. I used to play a lot of Super Mario Kart Time Trial. And the bike is slightly different because the programmers have very cleverly leaned into the fact that the bike changes weight when you change direction. So you do have to get used to that. And you might also notice at various points in the run speed up and slow down happening. So that is because I'm playing on what is known as Revision 0, as we get a whack from Dave the backmarker. Say hello to Dave, he's going to be making a lot of trouble for us. But Revision 0 basically means that this is the first version of the game, and when there's a lot on screen, the game's going to slow down just a very little bit, but when there's not much going on, it'll speed up. So if you imagine, a lot of speedrunners play at 60 frames a second, but imagine playing at 50 for brief moments. That's basically the kind of difference we'll be facing today. It can be advantageous, and a lot of runners prefer to play on Revision 0 for those reasons. One notable runner who plays on Revision 01 is the aforementioned 2-time Sega World Champion JKL, and who actually used to hold the world record in this beginner course. Now, Revision 1 not only has the frame rate capped so that it never dips or changes, it has slightly different steering, which to many of us feels very strange. It's almost harder to hug the inside of corners. But we don't mind which version you play. There are also some signpost differences, which we'll discuss later on, but that's all you need to know for now. One other thing with this game is that because it's a super scalar game, you'll notice me going to the inside of the track there. Now, you might be wondering, why am I deliberately going to a place that's not tarmac and slowing myself down? Reason for that is that superscalar games are slightly different to most racing games. Because you might notice by now that the bike is staying in the centre of the screen no matter how much I weave and bend, and the track is moving around me. And that's some really clever hardware tech created by Yu Suzuki, one of the directors of this game, who also made such classics as Space Harrier. And what that means is that the original arcade mode this was running on was created in such a way to simulate a 3D effect really nicely. But the problem with that is that no matter how much you brake, the course is only so wide, and sometimes you will get thrown to the outside no matter what. So because of that, there are times it's actually going to be beneficial to nick the inside of the track and try and avoid being slowed down so that you can go faster on the outside, on the exits of corners. Not like that, there's a blooper for you. Traditionally, when I do this in events, I try and crash into a signpost at some point, so we fulfilled that early today. Kind of a little blooper there. You don't want to crash in general because they'll cost you about 5 or 6 seconds, but everyone who plays this, when you do an all courses run, you basically will crash once or twice. And if it's a silly crash like that where it's not really your fault, you don't mind so much. Here's a bit of in-clipping for you. You can see just how wide of an S-bend that is, be deep and crunchy. And it's going to be easier for me to get an exit speed on the outside here. You might also notice a lot of tapping on the turbo button. And if you notice, the speedometer is in the top right corner. It's not really easy to pay attention to the road and to the speedometer at the same time. That is my favourite palm tree. He said hello to me early today. The palm trees aren't so bad. What you really have to watch out for is Kate Bush later on, but a slightly shaky start to the first course, but we've still comfortably completed it in the time limit with a gaggle of riders going past me there. And we get to the goal. And you'll notice on the end screen a time. We'll need to subtract about 2 or 3 seconds from that to get the accurate time, but again, power of spreadsheet, it's all good. As I say, we don't mind if you run revision 0 or revision 1. The one thing you can't do is use a password, because there is an original mode in this game where you get passwords from upgraded bikes. We have had people try and do that before and use an upgraded bike on this. We will find you and we will remove your runs. 335 is appalling. It can only get better from here. Enter the name, and let's go on to the second course. You can see original mode there, we'll discuss that later on. Junior is my favourite course, it's fast and flowing. I think it would make a good goal for a Sega 8. We've also got Sprinter here, one of my favourite musics. And on the music in this game, it was partly composed by Funky Katsuhiro. I didn't know that until this year, when I started running a new favourite game of mine, Quartet. And that's another underrated gem on the Master System, which I'm begging for you all to play. And that was also composed by him, so he's got some chops. Very experienced with FM sound units and stuff like that. So I'm tapping the turbo here to try and stay on the inside more, because counterintuitively, even though this is a race, and there is in theory a racing line to get around other bikes, you want to be on the inside as much as you can. So if you imagine being on the inside, against on the centre line, against on the outside, you're saving a lot more time on the inside. And the game is literally drawing the track a little bit faster as well. Now there are times, especially later on, when I'm going to break that rule, but I'm very aggressive. I'm much more in the Ayrton Senna style of mould. Not that I'm anywhere near skilled, but very raggy, very kind of aggressive with my play. So I like to eke out every little centimetre. We're in a very crunchy S-bend here, and one of the aspects with Super Scalar is that any time you've got an S-bend like that, there is always a tiny strip of straight land between the two halves of an S. Oh, thank you, Dave. Say hi to Dave, everyone. Dave is the permanent backmarker in this game, as christened by our original mode master, Cecil Monk. Dave is a pain in the arse, and the AI bikes in this game follow the general rules of Genesis RNG. So any of you out there who've played Genesis games much will know that a lot of it is procedural, and what that means is that the game says, I want to load this asset in right now. Have I got time and space to do so? So about 90% of the bikes are generally going to spawn in the same area every time, but 5 or 10% of them will actually change position, depending on when you arrive in corners. And what I mentioned earlier with the entry of corners on the inside, that applies there as well. So there are times when we might be able to find manipulations by going to the outside of corners rather than the inside, to change the position of bikes. And as we go up the courses, the other bikes will get a lot more aggressive with their lines. So you'll see right now they're not really taking the median strip on the right hand side here to try and in-clip. There's one of my favourite little in-clips there. Just makes it so much easier to get to top speed afterwards, although it's risky with these lampposts, I will admit. Hopefully our biker friend has a good orthodontist in case of accidents. You'll also see some Morrow signs on the right hand side there. And back in the 80s, as I think a lot of us know, smoking was extremely prevalent. We call it vaping now, of course, down with the kids. But basically, when this game came out, there was licensing with fake Marlboro signs for Bridgestone signs, and eventually the companies involved asked Sega to change those signs out because of copyright. So that's why in Revision 0 you've got those signs, but in Revision 1 they changed them, and you've got different brands instead. That's one of the ways to tell which version you've got. I personally think the Morrow is iconic. Mind you, I grew up with ancient Formula 1 like Marlboro, McLaren and stuff like that, so of course I would say that. But I will just say, don't smoke, you know, lungs are for oxygen. I personally have had a batload of coffee and donuts this morning. My vice is caffeine and sugar. Because you need a reaction time for this game. A long corner here where I'm going to try and hug the inside and then let myself push out. And one of the problems with the superscalar effect is that when you're leaning with this bike, you're effectively pushing outwards as well as accelerating. So that bit there, and especially areas like that, where you're changing directions rapidly, as you go up the courses you will tend to want to have a bit of margin on both the inside and the outside. So the more flexible you can be with your positioning, the better. A little clip there, just to avoid slowing down too much. And I'm sure you all know what slowing down means in terms of the English language, but if you think about it logically, there are two ways to brake. There's letting go of the accelerator, which is more like floating or soft braking, and there's pressing the A button, either in conjunction with that or holding the B button as well. So there are some different braking effects that we can actually get out of the bike. And depending on where we are, depending on how raggy of a situation we're in, we'll want to use those differently. Try and avoid being thrust into a sea of arrows there. The Asia is fast and flowing. It's a wonderful little course to give you the basics of the game. And we're coming up on a difficult section now where there's going to be lots of tight bends. So just to do a little bit of tapping the turbo, tapping the D-pad here. Because another thing you can do is tap the D-pad instead of tap the turbo. So when you want to move outwards, you can just let go of your direction. Big old braking zone here. Taking a knock from that guy isn't so bad there because I'm already on the inside. Oftentimes when you whack into a bike, it will send you hurtling in the opposite direction. You'll have to rapidly know what you're doing and change direction to avoid being thrown into scenery. A little section here with the crossing of the road where you've got bikes on the right hand side. They're coming closer and closer. We're going to brave it out and try and let them cross at a safe moment, because again, being on the inside is faster. Big braking zone, double apex. Get a spare change of underwear for that one. And as I say, it's common to crash in this game, so like, psychologically you don't mind so much as long as it's not a really stupid crash or one that you've kind of caused yourself. And these first couple of courses aren't so bad, but the upper courses do take some learning. Like when I first played America, I was growling at the screen, because it's just so difficult. But what you can do now with the save states, obviously, you can practice in chunks. So you can do 2 or 3 sections at a time, make a save state, try again. Now I've mentioned that I'm one of the more aggressive runners of this game. If you want to pick the game up and learn from someone very exemplary, I'm going to recommend you go and look at Defang Devlin's runs. And Dev was the person who I looked up to when I was trying to get the records in this game. Had some wonderful battles with him, pushing the times lower and lower. He is very much more classical in the Alan Prost style mode, getting pinballed by a couple of bikes there. Because Dev likes to go on the correct racing line regardless of whether it slows him down by a second or two. Ooh, big bikes there. So Dev will often go on the outside and corner from defensive positions. As I've gotten older, I've done more of that myself, especially in the upper couple of courses. It's a case of picking and choosing and like learning how you want to handle it. Because you can wing it, but if you don't do your homework on this game, it will punish you. But if you think this is difficult, I'm going to also shout out Cecilman. Now, Cecil is one of the mods of this game. He is also currently the only person to play original mode, which takes all these pairs of sections from arcade mode, chops them up into pairs, and throws you into a 4-hour marathon where you can not only upgrade the bike in various ways, but you've got to actually race a rival, and it's extremely difficult. God knows I'm never going to run that, although JKL has said he's interested. And if either of them want to run in a marathon, I'll certainly willingly volunteer to commentate on nonsense for 4 hours. I seem to be good at that. So the world record in the Africa course is currently 309, and that was the first ever 309, which I managed to get a couple of years ago. There is in theory the possibility of 308, but it would require everything to go right, and you'll see just how annoying all these enemy bikes can be. In theory we could change the difficulty down to easy on the traffic settings, but mostly we tend to just put on normal because that's just like the honourable thing to do, you know. 2 courses done. Do a little bit of wrist stretching. I don't know about any of you, but I personally use a different finger on left and right for this game. I got very lucky because a few years ago I got a thumbnail injury and I had to use 2 fingers on the left and right, so it gave me a little bit of extra reaction time. And that is a horrible IGTF 601, which is probably about 554. World record for junior is 535. Again, that could be lowered down to probably about 529. As I've gotten older, I really have gotten more lazy, though I will admit. I don't really feel the burn to improve this game as much. Now for the upper 2 courses, I'm going to change the difficulty on the time only to easy, just to be extra safe. Let's go to America. We've got North America, Central and South, 14 stages. This is where it really starts to get difficult. But we've got the iconic winning run, so it's all good. As I say, Cecil has done the original mode. He's also one of the top runners of the arcade mode Africa course. We have, however, also got the original arcade game for you if you want to run that. There are, however, some notable differences between that and this. So not only are there a couple of different ROM sets on the arcade board, which mean that some of the courses have completely different layouts, but the sprite bikes in that one are much chunkier. So there might be times in this course and in this run today where I can chop through these enemy bikes, accelerating through them diagonally, because of the way the game is shrinking the sprites in hardware. On the arcade mode, you basically just pay your money, take your chance, and if you'd crash, you just laugh and say, thank you, can I have another go? Because it is so hard to do everything perfectly, it runs at light speed. The only thing that would compare is literally to run this at 1.5 speed, 90 frames a second. I have done that before, just for a bit of fun. But arcade mode is completely different, and it's just so much more atmospheric, but it's not something you would expect to master in this lifetime. So generally people pick one or the other, this or the arcade, because they do handle very differently as well. Like, I would broadly say arcade mode is going to teach you defensive skills more, and playing the Genesis game is going to teach you precision a little bit better. And it depends on how you transition from one to the other. Hopefully these AI bikes and Dave are going to give me the inside line a bit here, because we've got to be quite careful. Here's an example where I'm going to follow Dev and go from the outside to brake. Because any of you who've seen any of my speedruns know I tend to react a bit early, and there in particular is a corner where if you go on the inside and brake too early, you're going to have a mouthful of pine needles. We don't want that. And this game is featured in a number of compilations, the Mega Games compilation, 10 in 1. So it's very well known, and there's been ports of the arcade version to the PlayStation and the Xbox and the Wii. Although I will mention, as far as we know, every single one of these has the in-game timer bug, which is kind of interesting, especially given that Outrun has a similar thing. Dave showing up there. We only found that a few years ago, and it was really nice that we were able to. Hey Marso. We don't have too many people running this. I think Super Monaco GP is a bit more popular. Personally, I couldn't run Super Monaco GP, like, just that baffles me, because the idea of making a mistake by pressing up or down on a D-pad for the gearing, that would do me in. Change direction a little bit early, so I've got acceleration and braking movement there. Because again, with the S-bends, it's easy to change direction early. And one of the problems is if you're early or late on the change of direction, it'll end up sort of compounding on the next part of the S. Shout out to Sheem, of course, who's one of the masters of Super Monaco GP. He also has ran the beginner course in this, because I did a bounty a couple of years ago for that. Getting pinned to the outside here, do a little bit of braking. Excuse me. Other bikes knocking into you is quite a hazard in this game, to the point where even just a couple of collisions can seriously dent your chances of world records. Now, probably the ones I'm proudest of are Asia and America, because America, the world record is now 7:58, and we think that was the first ever sub-8, although there might be some old Japanese runs that were never actually uploaded to VHS back in the day, or Betamax, who knows. But this is a really cool speed game, because the first couple of courses make a beautiful 12-hour challenge. There's plenty of resources, you can change the difficulties, you can approach it at your own pace, and because you're not fighting for an actual winning position, all you have to do is finish the course and you've done a speedrun. So it's really nice like that. Ooh, yeah, big gaggle of bikers there. And the first half of America hasn't been so bad so far, but the second half is really going to ramp up. We're going to have oil drums, we're going to have very devious turns, and at the end of America we're going to start having treble wide corners where you've almost literally got to do in-clips if you want to get a good respectable time. So again, just because the track is throwing me out no matter how much I brake, it's better for me just to scrub speed on the early bit, give myself some flexibility. Coming up on the Desert Canyon section, one of my favourites. We're going to have a lovely big in-clip at some point here. We're also... Whoops. See, that's like you lose concentration for like a tenth of a second and something just happens. But we're going to have a big old in-clip. We're going to have some cactuses to be careful of. Let's see if we can carry on doing some decent jobs here. So with this traffic, it's common for them to come up in gaggles. And the different coloured bikes will move in different directions. So I think it's yellow move right to left and green right to left. The bike is okay. He's got a few splinters in his bum, but that's alright. He's got a good suit on. Coming up on the bends now. This is the biggest, severest bend in the entire game. All the way down to 90. That one can really throw you. Do a little bit of braking here because there's going to be a bike on the outside. We want to avoid knocking into him. Hey DOS, welcome in. Wonderful to hear somebody else loves the Master System. Master System was my first console as well. Speaking of the Master System and the Genesis, since I've got you all here, hundreds of you, I am also going to do a quick little plug for next Saturday. Because those of you who know the SegaCrew, or those of you who don't, I am going to be taking part in and kind of hosting my first race next week. We've got something called the Sega Brew, which is going to be a race of homebrew games. Because even these days, the Master System and the Genesis get some love from creators. And JKL and I have picked a bunch of games on each of the consoles for people to race, so I'd love to see some of you come and check that out. Those of you who know me know I'm reasonably picky about my races, so I can guarantee you I've picked fun goals. That's going to be a blast. Oil Drum Alley coming up, do a big break-in. Another thing that's slightly easier with this game than Super Monaco Grand Prix, Outrun or Hang-On, there's a little bit less perspective shift on the horizon. It does, however, take some getting used to when you look at the horizon for where the changes are and like the corner entry and exits. It is certainly tempting to look further towards the bike, but it tends to harm you if you do that. I'm going to do a slight little bit more of tapping on the turbo now. Not only because I can't tell where the speed is, unless I hear it with the engine note, but because if I am slightly too close to somebody, I'm not immediately pushing all the way out at an uncontrollable speed. Hey! Hey Grayskull, thank you so much for the raid. We're doing a bit of Super Hang On here. How was you? Here's another dodgy corner. Don't brake too early. It's also difficult because you tend not to get a visual cue where the bite of a corner changes, because there's a lot of double radius corners where it goes wide and then loose, or loose and then wide, and you've really got to commit and learn what you're doing. So first couple of courses you can kind of get away with winging it, but on these two, if you don't know what you're doing, it will bite you and chew you up. We mentioned Dave the back marker earlier. Dave is behaving for the most part, thankfully. However, we've now got Kate Bush coming up. I will admit I'm not a fan of Kate Bush's music, but the stages from 11 onwards have got some really, really nasty shrubbery. And it's incredibly easy to get suckered into walking into one of these because of the way the track warps and bends. And you can know where they are, but avoiding them is an entirely different matter. It's especially easy to second guess yourself and like get tense about it, so the quicker you come to grips with the idea that you are going to crash, the better. He said, almost crashing. Lol. And I'll also shout out B-Trim, Master System Marceau, Chest Jerk, because B-Trim is the master of the original hang-on the Master System. That looks absolutely brutal because that will actually explode you if you crash into other people. Now, granted, I've played World Grand Prix, which has the same mechanic, but at least there you can sort of soft brake and run away from these collisions. How anyone can run that for 40 minutes, I do not know. And Outrun is similar. Like, it's strange to play Outrun once you've played this, because you end up thinking you've got far more width in corners than you do because you're playing with a car rather than a bike. At least in my experience. Difficult to transition between the two, and I personally also find Outrun is harder because of the elevation changes. So even when you know what you're doing, it sort of feels blind. It's funny how even racers have strengths and weaknesses like that. I think it would be really cool one day to have a race of nothing but racing games, because we know the Genesis has lots of cool stuff like Rock and Roll Racing, Micro Machines, Street Racer is out there, and there's so much different stuff to challenge yourself with. Not a terrible America so far. I'm going to do a little bit of what I call warping now on the straights because there's so many traffics. They're so greedy to take the inside line, I don't want to collide into them. So I'm giving myself that extra few frames of reaction time. And I also want to avoid being thrown into a sea of arrows, which is not so easy now because no matter how much I react, these bikes are always going to be on the same line as me. So basically you either get the right line first try or you lose time. And even just these final two sectors can cost you world record in this course. Thankfully I'm not going for that today, no such problem. Nah, stay on the road, young man. This is why you have coffee and donuts before a race like this. Yeah, brake, brake, brake. Up the tailpipe, no problem at all. So you see just how quickly the perspective changes with these obstacles. It's devilish to weave between these other bikes, it really is. 46 is 3 seconds lost in that one sector alone. Ooh. So, although in theory you could brake just by letting go of the accelerator and floating, as I've gotten more experience with the game I found it's actually a risky idea because you can't control it as well. So in theory you could even do that when you're turboing, but it doesn't seem to be that useful. I mean, maybe somebody will find something for it in the future. Up the final corner, up Ascension Hill. I also find it helps to name the corners, that's just me. Yeah. And if you're wondering, the bike's colour design is based on Shinichi Ito, who completed in the 500cc in Japan. As we finish America with plenty of time to spare, taking a hit. J-Fred is exactly right, there were sit-down and stand-up arcade machines, and they've got slightly different revisions to the courses. But I've never played the actual arcade machine where you sit on the bike. I don't think I could, although, having said that, I have got the thighs for it because I grew up in Sheffield, so plenty of hills. Expert is, yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. 837 is terrible, but who cares? So the first 3 courses are hard as hell. Expert is war, and I really do mean that. SEGATHON. The smart among you will know what that spells. Thank you, Edward. So, on to the final course. And it makes sense that it's Europe, because Europe has the most roads, of course. 18 stages of wrist-pummeling mayhem coming up. This is one of the hardest things on the Genesis. We've got completions on this board from Tom Vatava, the Twin Galaxies legend, Anthopants, the Street of Rage Man. This is evil. You can't rest for a moment. We're starting in the grey, drizzly shores of France with the Eiffel Tower behind us. No mercy from now on. AI bikes are going to be much more aggressive, and they're actually going to start chopping across you as well. S-bend. So it generally helps to accelerate into the other side of an S-bend and then do a little bit of braking because it takes a moment to change the lean on the bike. Really clever programming by the people who made this. Feels so realistic. Find a change point. Like, if people want to submit for expert with the AI on easy and the time on easy, we would absolutely welcome that. What matters is to be able to finish and enjoy it, you know? The one thing with this game, the one disadvantage, as we all know, anything with the Genesis that uses emulation and has speed up and slow down, there are issues with accuracy. Now, for some reason, a lot of runners prefer to play on emulator as opposed to console. Even though, on emulator, the game actually runs slightly faster. Because I've got the console, I've got a Genesis from the US a few years ago, but when you play on the console, it feels like you're playing in tar, even on Rev Zero. Do a big old in-clip here. It's also hard to keep braking with that inside of the curve and not go inside. But as far as emulators, B-Trim and Taco did an infamous comparison video a few years ago, and you can see differences between Blastum and GPGX and BizHawk and Fusion. Basically, don't run with Fusion because you'll be playing on a rocket ship if you do. I mean, we're not going to punish you exactly, but we'd recommend you do them. You know. But when this was in the Mega 16 a few years ago, there were probably a few differences with the timing because of that, but it doesn't really matter because we're using in-game time anyways. And the in-game timer is generally accurate apart from that sub-seconds bug that we mentioned. Do a little bit of braking here to make sure not to be thrown too far outside. We've got some Bird adverts. I'm guessing Bird is like a tropical juice bar or something. Whatever it is, it sounds very tasty. I could go for one of those today. You see just how close these bikes are getting, and this is only the 4th stage. And then we've got a flip here, so a flip is like a big old S where there's no braking. Again, be cautious. It's very easy to be hubristic and like go in too far with this game. Or it's also especially easy to crash a couple of times and lose your motivation and sort of lose your adrenaline. But, I mean, I'm a decent runner at this and I crash sometimes, it's fun, you know, It's nice to have something that you will never perfect and where every game is different. And I don't run many Genesis games, but the ones I do are Stone Cold classics. So there's this, there's Mercs, there's Marble Madness. Really difficult bendy section here. The bendy wendy. Ah! But yeah, the original mode takes all the chops up the stages and remixes it so that you can upgrade tyres, brakes, engine, all sorts of different things. And Settlemunk did a fantastic job routing that. I personally wouldn't want to run it because it would take such a lot, but it's incredibly impressive, and I recommend you watch his run. He's also a Top Gear runner, so it makes sense. We're going to be going into the Netherlands soon. We've got windmills in the background, we'll do a little bit of brake slowdown there. Now it's going to get really nasty because I'm going to be doing so much more dodging. But you see there, they're cutting across me on a straight and I'm immediately just losing all my speed. Because it's not exactly second guessing, it's just you end up becoming highly defensive. So a good time for this run would be under 11 minutes, but world record actually in this is get really optimized as well. And the world record is by Luca Ferox, 10:26, which is an amazing run. He doesn't get hit once. I could never play the way he plays. And for expert, we could in theory get down to maybe mid 10.1x. Maybe at some point I'll go for that, but it would require a lot of grinding. And psychologically, it's like it's tough because it takes out your wrists and your fingers. And you can generally tell when the game is like against you, but even just one bad sector halfway through ruins the entire run. And we mentioned the Master System earlier. I will also just let you know I will be back later on this evening along with Paul. And the OG himself, Mr. Booster Shane, will be running in the Wonder Boy block. So I'll be running Wonder Boy in Monster World on the Master System for that. Hopefully you're enjoying this run here and you're inspired to pick up one of the courses. And if you think this is a little bit much for you, then feel free to pick up one of the other fantastic Sega racing games. Sheem and all the others will be happy to help you along. Just hop into the SegaCrew Discord and chat with us about it. Getting to halfway through, we've got a really nice section here where we've got a bunch of left right turns. Nasty one there. But the effect of this section is psychological, where you end up going left right, and then by the time section 10 rolls around, you think that there's going to be a left right, but it throws you to a double left. It's really well designed, because when you're learning this game, you sort of inevitably can't remember absolutely every little detail at the start. So the amount of times I got thrown off by that, or suddenly have to react to a bush, it's quite challenging. Yeah, just like that. Road Rash is one of the ones I've never played, so I've seen a lot of people enjoy it, but it's funny, I never touched that one at all. But I'm sure I will at some point get to a run of it on some console or other. So we've got a double left here, then we've got a nice one where we can do some in-clipping. And then we'll be into the night stages, which are even harder because there are lampposts everywhere. Friendly in-clip, no, didn't get it. Got to break down. See just how you can't even guarantee yourself the outside line. So, gaggles of bikes now, 3-4 abreast. Do some warping. Nick the inside there. It's counterintuitive when it scrubs your speed, but it really does make it quicker. Into the night section. I also played a lot of Formula 1 games when I was a kid, so Formula 1 97, for example, that's one of my loves. I've always been a Formula 1 fan more than MotoGP, but it's tremendous to watch these guys do it. Like, how anyone can do this in real life, the risk of injuries, I can't imagine. I always enjoyed watching more sedate sports like tennis and snooker, because I am a chicken. Ooh, breakdown. You see just how quickly the bend changes on you and there are bikes ahead, and you can roughly know where they're going to be, but you still have to react. So, you know, you can't just play the same way every time, you have to adapt. There's an example of some bad biking. Make sure not to turbo into the bushes. Yeah. Yeah. So easy to go careening into those signposts. Yeah. Yeah. I'm meant to know what I'm doing and I'm still making those angsty noises. Right. Try. There we go. That's the lampposting clip we want. Keep a bit of speed. Section 13 is one of my favourites. It's got something I lovingly refer to as the Acceler Circle, which is these 4 big right-handers where in theory you can keep accelerating through them if you do it correctly. But what's interesting about this game, there is no TAS, which is to say that there's only a TAS of the first course, but I went faster than it. Now, I know how arrogant that sounds, but I somehow have a habit of going faster than TASes, and I can't really say much more than that. But there should be a TAS of this game, somebody should make one eventually, because it would be so amazing to see just how aggressive it could be, and how much it could manipulate the enemy bikes. So 8-Bit Beast, if you're watching, make a TAS please. I'll pay you in chocolate. Yeah. That's another of these things is where, like, you don't expect to be thrown onto the verge, and then because of that you end up reacting late, and because you're reacting late you then have to avoid a sea of arrows and you overreact. So, yeah. Yeah. Hello, Dave. Can I revoke your super license, please? Yeah! Nope. Into the barriers we go. One less smoking advertisement for the world. Suffice to say, I have never attempted playing a run of this game after drinking too much. That said, me and alcohol are not the best of friends. So drink responsibly. But this is the sort of game where you want extra coffee, extra donuts. So we're coming up on what is meant to be like the catch-up section. 2 sectors before the end. It's meant to be fast and flowing, but actually it's extremely devilish because these AI bikes are just going to chop me to pieces. So I'm hopefully going to do a lot more of warping with the D-pad to just modulate my X position a bit. More of warping with the turbo, and hopefully that will prevent some collisions. But you've always got to be on your lookout like that, because you'll get chucked into the side. Only a few sections left, pretty decent run. So for the arcade mode, obviously we've got the in-game timer for all the courses with the sub-seconds being manipulated and carried over. And then for an all courses run, you basically just sum the 4 times that you got. And the world record for that is just a shade below 28 minutes. Because it's pretty difficult to get perfect runs when you're doing it back to back to back without resets. So at some point we could probably knock that down to a mid-26, but that would take a lot of work. And again, I will shout out Defend Devilum because he and I had some fantastic tennis matches back in the day on the old courses, back during the pandemic. And without him encouraging me and supporting me, I wouldn't have got to where I got with this game. And I'll also shout out the Super Hang-On crew, Cecil Monk, Cludge, all the guys who watch the streams and support me. 2 sectors left in this run. Let's see if we can avoid the majestic Kate Bush. I have quite enough bush at home, thank you. These corners here are so wide that you just have to go wide if you want to be fast. It's kind of, you can be careful and finish, or you can be fast and risk crashing. You can't really combine the two. That thread the needle. And I will also mention, oh, that's a bad crash. That's going to happen. I will also mention my buddy Miss Truffles is making her debut in the SEGATHON this evening, so stick around for her Echo Junior run, because that's going to be fantastic. And this has been my first SEGATHON, so it's lovely to be here with you all. Congratulations to the SegaCrew on 5 glorious years, and here's to 5 more. Everyone at home, crack open a nice frosty drink of some sort and celebrate. Yeah! Yeah! Not long now. Hang on, as they say. Oh, you could have a soft drink, Paul. Yeah, water's good. Up the hill we go, into the final corner. We're going to finish with plenty of time left. No problem, Nadicular. We've crashed into a signpost for the lols. That's the game. Let's check the final time. Show that we've got a valid run. Thank you for the GGs. Oh. Do a bit of wrist stretching. Oi, oi, oi. You finish Europe, you know you've been in a battle. 11:13, so that'll be, what, about 11:05, maybe 11:04? We'll take it. So that has been Super Hang-On for the Sega Genesis. And if you would like to run the game, we would love to have you in the Discord, in the SegaCrew, running with us all. I have been Patak, keep watching this Segathon, stay hydrated, and until I see you next, glory to you and your D-pad.